I met Frances McGrogan because she and I are both members of Dave Jackson's School of Podcasting, and she's been helping me make this show a little bit better. One of the really cool things about Frances is that she's retired, and she has started her own podcast called Stand Curious. Her podcast is about different hobbies that people have, so I thought that she'd make a great guest on today's episode of Rock Your Retirement.
Talking with people about how to have a great retirement. This is the Rock Your Retirement Show. We don't talk about money, but we talk about almost everything else you need to rock your retirement. Now, here's your host, Kathy Klein.
Our guest today is Frances McGrogan, who was born in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. Sorry, that's a mouthful for me. And moved to England for 4 years in her early 20s. She got married to a Brit and then returned to Canada. After a number of service industry jobs, in 1985, she joined the Canada Border Services Agency and worked there for about 30 years. She also learned to speak French when she was around 48 years old. And you know, it's really difficult to learn a language after you turn 14. So we're going to talk to her about that. So she became bilingual. Frances was a senior HQ manager until retired in January of 2016 at the age of 55. How lucky is that? She loves computers and will let her tell us her story about how she became involved in that. But also she has other activities that help her rock her retirement. She's on the show because of some very interesting things that she's doing, and you'll find out about them in a few minutes. Frances, welcome to the show. Tell us how you first got into computers and what you're doing now.
Well, hi, Kath, and thanks very much for inviting me. This is quite exciting.
Yes.
I've never been actually interviewed before. I don't really think so. So computers. There's always just been something ever since they brought a computer into my office. One computer, because it was the only one. It was on the single one on the end of the floor, and no one knew what to do with it. It took some lab technician in a white coat about 3 days to install it. And so there was a little bit of a mystery about it, and no one really knew what to do. So I used to go over and just sort of turn it on and see if I could make it do things. I used to try little words, like I used to type in all kinds of, go, please, stop. And eventually somebody said, try the word "der." So I didn't know what it stood for, but I put in "der," and all of a sudden all this stuff came on the screen. It flashed off, but that had me hooked. I had to make, it's a command in DOS to make give a directory of all the files that are on the system.
Oh, DIR.
Yes.
Oh, DIR. I was thinking DUR, and I'm like, I don't know what DIR means.
No, directory. Yeah, that was fun. It was so exciting when all these characters went flying by on this tiny little screen, and I thought, I love this thing.
Wow. When was that?
Well, I think it must have been about 86. So
Okay.
it was pretty early days for a computer to be in an office environment. You still sort of thought of computers as those things that took up a whole room.
Right. I remember that. I remember when I got my first computer, it was 1990, and it was a laptop.
Wow,
and
that's early.
I was the only person in my office who had a laptop. I was selling investments at the time, and my boss told me that I needed to get a laptop. And it was a lot of money for me at the time. It was, $3,000. It was more than I made in a month.
Mm.
And I thought, I don't know if I can afford this. And it had 40 megabyte hard drive.
That was standard back then.
And it had like a carrying case, and the thing was built like a tank. And I was the only one who had one. And I was young, I was in my 20s. And so I was selling retirement plans. So I was going to people who were in their 60s with this laptop.
I had a portion of my position was one time I used to be an auditor, and it was in the early 90s. And at one point, they started asking us to carry these laptops. And you're right, they were so heavy.
Like 50 pounds, Oh, yeah, it's a traveling computer. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I used to have to go through the airport with this thing. I'd forgotten. They were really heavy, weren't they?
They were. They were so heavy, just like the phone. Remember the old phones?
Yes.
The brick phones?
I do. Yeah,
Oh, so
crazy.
so you got interested after you typed in DIR and saw the cool thing. So how did you learn it? And how old were you back then? Were you in your 20s like I was when I first
Yeah,
started?
late 20s, I guess, early 30s.
Okay. So did you take a DOS class or you just learned it intuitively or how did you learn?
Well, there wasn't an awful lot. Yeah, it was mostly self-taught. Like I said, trying words, trying to see what it would do. I've always been thinking, what would it do? I remember when I first tried to get it to get attached to get online, but it was just through the phone lines to connect to our local library. It was very hard because you had to manually set, this all these different parameters and parity and so on. And I remember I got a friend. I finally found another friend who was also interested, and she lived about 3 houses down. And so we would sit there every evening trying to get our computers to talk to each other over the phone
Oh,
lines.
how fun.
And it was a riot. And we just kept trying all of these different things. And I remember, after doing it hours and hours, days later, I saw her words come across my screen and I jumped up and I was so excited. And my husband looked at me and said, "Why didn't you just pick up the phone and call her?"
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, that wasn't the point.
The
So,
point
yeah,
was it was
just to
exciting.
it's
Yeah.
exciting, and it was really fun just to try to figure out what to say to make this thing work for you, and it was such a rush when it did something back. And I think that really caused a momentum. So I kept on trying to learn a little bit more, a little bit more. I tried to get my children, my husband, my extended family and friends interested as well. So I think I just thought it just had a fascination for me, and I wanted to know how to make it do these things.
So is the word for that geek or nerd?
Either way, I'm a wannabe. I know that I'm always going to be on the edge because I've always, it's a hobby. It's never been a full-time thing for me. And I've had an awful lot of other things I like to do as well. So I always think I'm a wannabe.
Well,
But I
well,
would say
funny.
both because, I like science fiction and all that kind of thing as well too. So
Did
yeah.
you watch that show? I don't know if it was in Canada, but we had a pilot here called Humans. Did you get that in Canada?
Um, we may have done. I'm not a big television watcher. I'll watch a few shows and movies that, when I select to do that.
Hmm.
So I don't tend to watch or follow the series so much. So sorry to say it might have been, it's very likely that it was in Canada, but it doesn't ring a bell for me.
Well, I think it got canceled anyway. It had like
Oh,
6 episodes, and it was about these androids that looked like humans, and how they were being chased down by the government to be deconstructed because they weren't supposed to be able to think,
like Blade Runner.
and have baby. They wanted to have their own lives.
Oh, there's been so many. There was The Code Maker, which is a book I read years and years ago, which was on that theme. And there was also Blade Runner with Harrison Ford, which was the same sort of theme. Where does a computer stop being a computer into a robot, into a thinking sentient being?
Well, there's actually
It's
I
fascinating.
posted on I don't know if it was I think it was on my personal Facebook page where there's actually a computer now that they've built
Hmm.
that is an android and it looks like a person. It talks to you and it says that I want to learn, I want to go to school, and maybe someday I want to have a family, but right now I'm not considered a real person, so I can't do that.
It's like Pinocchio.
I
Yeah, those
know.
themes have always been so interesting for us, I think. But, as humans, what makes us human? AI, artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
They've been making some real strides in that lately. I've been following, there's been a chess game, a computer that'll play chess, and it's been doing rather well against the humans. So I think they continue to push the frontier of AI out, I think.
Absolutely. If see now, I really want one that'll come and clean my house, but then I'll feel guilty if it looks like a human, and I'll feel like, oh, it wants to have its own life, and it's my little computer slave. So,
We'll have to train our dogs to do that then.
yeah, well, the dogs don't have an opposable thumb, so it's really
No,
hard.
it's a problem. We can figure this out.
So, you have some interesting hobbies. So, tell our listeners how you and I met.
Well, you were just starting into the podcasting world, and I've been hovering around podcasting for the last few years. Where I was working, I was trying to sort of do it on the side, but I've decided to, now that I'm retired, I can do it full time. And as you're coming into this area as well, we both made a selection of our chosen coach, Dave Jackson, the School of Podcasting. Wonderful place, a wonderful group of people. And so we were both at detention, I think. Was it at detention that we both were at the same time?
In detention?
In detention. I like to think of we have these
school.
monthly school office hours, and I like to think of them as detention. So
that's funny. Yeah, he probably would put me in detention if he could. Because I don't always follow his advice exactly. Just like you, I think we have the same target audience. My target audience is baby boomers, although your podcast, I think anybody could listen to.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your podcast. What's it about?
Well, my podcast is called standcurious.com. And I think that it's sort of a theme that I've had throughout my entire life is it's sort of that FOMO, FOMO, fear of missing out. I always want to see the next thing. I want to see what's going on. What are you doing? When I meet people and I find out what they're doing, it's like, wow, that sounds interesting. I'd love to do that. Tell me more. And I know over the years, I've met so many people that have been doing so many interesting things. And I thought, one time when I have time, I'm going to look into that. I'm going to do a little bit of that. And I found that now that I am retired, I'm thinking, now, what were all of those things I wanted to do? So I wanted to compile all of those up and just continue that conversation with people. And, Kath, I think, like you said, is it baby boomers? And I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with even that term baby boomers, because it says you're a certain type of person because you were born in a certain range of time from this time to this time. Therefore, this is what you're interested in, and this is who you are. And I feel that we're really, regardless of age, we all have our individual interests. My interests seem to fall along the electronic computer range of things, but my children, neither one of them have much interest in computers for their own sake at all. So it doesn't necessarily follow those kinds of generational types of rules. I think you're interested in what you're interested in. I also have sort of a sub-name of the leisure generation for the people that I think that are interested. It's anybody that has a little bit of interest and leisure time available, and whether that's connected with your age or not, I think not. But yeah, so I talk to people about their hobbies and their interests and what they've got going on in their lives. And people are incredibly interesting. I'm really, really enjoying the interviews I've had so far.
What kinds of what kinds of hobbies have you learned about so far?
Well, I've talked to someone who does, she's an editor for books. So a person who wants to be a self-published editor, she would be a consultant editor, which is a sign of the times.
Right.
I spoke to a person who is a Latin scholar. He promotes and lives with Latin and about 7 or 8 other languages.
I was going to say, because Latin is so widely used.
Well, that's kind of how I started the interview. I said, so this is a dead language, isn't it? What are you doing? But it was really interesting because, for one thing, it does follow the definition of a dead language, but a dead language is defined as something who doesn't have native-born speakers. But in fact, Latin is quite well spoken all over the world.
Amongst doctors.
No, actually, mostly in scholarly areas, but doctors, lawyers, and the churches. But they actually speak the language. I thought it wasn't spoken, but it was spoken, and he proved to me by speaking some Latin at the end of my podcast for me.
Wow.
So I found that really interesting. And I've actually got a few that I haven't got up yet. Oh, I've got someone who does painting. She's a PhD college professor, but her real passion is painting. So we talked about painting, really what she gets out of it, how you would get started, and a little bit about what kind of hobby it is. Is it a solitary pursuit, or is it very a social one, and those sorts of things. I have a few more I don't know if they're up yet, but one is with a
But you
person
know
who
what?
has.
It doesn't matter if they're up because my interviews get posted usually several weeks later. So by the time this airs, all of
Yeah,
these
they'll all
people
be
you're
up.
talking about are
Yeah, it's
probably
true.
going to be up.
I have a lovely person who is expecting her second child, and she is covered in the most stunning tattoos. And she has agreed to come and talk to me about her body art and why she does it and what she gets from it. And I'm hoping to get some insights as to where she gets her designs and so on, and what makes her do that. So,
Now, where did you meet her?
well, okay, this person I met when I'm also involved with dog rescue organizations
Hmm.
up here. And so I met her a number of years ago now through that organization.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
So your hobby is basically interviewing people about their hobbies.
That's right. You can't have too many hobbies, right? It's sort of a
Well,
meta
speaking
thing.
of that, do you have other hobbies besides the podcast, or what else are you doing?
I really
And
enjoy
the dog rescue, of course.
my dogs. Yeah, I like to do that. I really enjoy photography, video, and images as well. And that includes all the way up to at one point when I used to be a website designer, I used to have a little business on the side doing that. And I found that there was a lot of people that needed good photographs for their website. So I started sort of taking photographs, and it sort of expanded until I started producing stock photography.
Wow.
And then there used to be, there's a place online called iStock Photo, and I'm one of the contributing photographers on that site. And
Fun.
so it's you sell your stock photography and you get a little paycheck every few months. That's a
Okay.
fun thing to do, and some people really do well financially there. Whereas for me, I dabble, but there's some of the photographers on there that have made a living doing that.
Wow.
So that's
Interesting.
quite an interesting thing. That's a fun thing to do. And it's just a fun thing, of course. And I really enjoy a lot of social activities. I play darts, and I've written the website for our darts, which takes in all of our numbers and gives all the darts people all the stats they can they can consume about their darting capacity and how it's changed over the years. So I'm on the executive for that, and I've been doing that for a number of
Now,
years.
now here in the US, at least I associate darts with drinking. So is this darts with drinking or darts with no
Yeah,
drinking?
people do drink. I'm not a big drinker. I never acquired the taste. I take my coffee into it's in a bar. Yes.
See, that's what I
Yes.
thought.
Yes. Okay, now that you mention it, people are drinking around me. I enjoy people that drink. I think they're so fun. I'm
Yeah.
always the designated driver. I'm always just having a laugh on the side. And I don't need to indulge myself in order to enjoy the atmosphere for sure.
No, I wasn't accusing you of drinking, but I just thought
That's
that was
quite all
funny.
right. It's quite all right.
So I would be interested to know whose stats are better, the ones that drink the most or the ones that drink the least.
You know what? You may be surprised to hear that people often say I can't shoot until I have a bit more to drink, and darned if they don't improve.
Well,
It's
the funny
so
thing
funny.
that you talked about the artist, and here in San Diego we have several organizations that do wine and painting. They have different
Oh
names.
yes, I've seen that.
Yeah, and so when I've gone a couple of times, and I always tell my friends when we go, I say, now my husband doesn't drink that much. And so we say, now he's going to be the designated driver. And the more you drink, the better your painting's going to turn out. So, and
Yep.
it's true because
Yes,
you loosen up and your
it
painting turns
absolutely
out a lot
is.
better. So,
Yep. Oh, people who drink are so much fun.
but
I
unless
wish
you
I
over,
just don't I just for some reason I prefer to have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and I just never acquired the taste for alcohol.
well, that's okay
But
because it's for some people, it's not good for them anyway. And overindulging
yeah.
is not good either. So,
Yeah. Well, and my
every,
husband's a Brit, so he does enjoy his beer. That's for sure. So, you know, he I shouldn't make him sound like a lush. But what I'm saying is he's fine with me being the designated driver when we socialize.
well, that's good. Now you have children, so do
Mhm,
they have a Canadian accent where they say
mhm.
"eh," or do they have a British accent, or is it somewhere in between?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I'll tell you why. Because my children are both full Canadian. They were born and brought up here. They were never in England until, except they had a British father. And my son was brought up, or he was looked after by his British. My mother's British. His other grandparents were all British, and they raised him until they went to kindergarten, or they, daycared
Mm.
him. So when he did start to kindergarten, he had the lovely little English accent, which soon disappeared. But my daughter, she moved back. She went to visit England, similarly to how I did. But she didn't come home. She hasn't been home yet, and she's been gone 12 years.
Oh, she probably has a British accent by now.
She certainly does. She lives she lives in Liverpool, and when we Skype, I just half the time I go, "What?" No idea.
What you
Because
say?
it's not just the accent, but it's also all of the idioms that they use, all the expressions.
Right,
It's
like, what do they say
incredible.
for trunk? In the United States, we say trunk, and they say
Boot,
boot.
boot.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
see, now I should know those because my mother was English, and, so I was brought up with all of those, but there's an awful lot of like she said, "I don't have much shrapnel on me," and I'm thought,
Shrapnel?
"What is she talking about?" And then I realized just through context that she meant she didn't have any loose change on her.
Oh,
So, when I lived in England, that was not an expression. So,
well, slang changes,
it
right?
does
So
well, it does, and England seems to change a little bit more quickly than other places maybe, but
right, absolutely.
and when you combine that with the accent, I don't know why we bother talking to them, you know?
I hope she doesn't hear this. No.
Oh, she's heard it before.
Yeah. Okay, so we're starting to wrap up. So there's a couple
Mhm,
of questions I want to get in before we're done with the interview. And that is, tell me about a typical day, the difference between a typical day when you were working and a typical day now.
well, when I worked, I had to get up about 6 o'clock in the morning and get dressed and have a shower and so on, and that is fact is absolutely identical. So, I've only been retired, as you've noticed, for a few months, but I've really tried to stick to a pattern of getting up, getting ready, getting dressed, and I'm an early riser anyway, so that doesn't change. What's changed is really, so far for me anyway, is just this huge weight and the sense of freedom that I can do whatever I want. So I'll come down and I'll do all of it because I'm very structured. I think it's a habit of a lifetime. I sat down and I made a schedule. I gave myself certain days off. Wednesdays are typically my days off, which means I can go out and meet friends for coffee and so on. But I try to stick to that because I really want to do some of these things, and I like to I'm taking a number of online courses, and I really want to make sure that I do my podcast, and so I try to stay quite structured still. But it's the mindset that's so different, I think, more than anything else. I met my friend for coffee a few days ago, and it was during the day, and I suddenly looked around, and I suddenly got this absolute thrill went through me when I realized that normally her and I would be at work and we would be feeling, oh, we have to rush off to work. And there was this just a humongous, wonderful feeling of freedom that I can do whatever I want. And I think that's why I so enjoy talking to people about what they're doing because I don't want to miss out. I want to hear what everybody's doing and maybe, take a little bit of a taste of everything. And I have that feeling that I can do that now. So, you know, typical day isn't all that different. I come home, my husband comes home at 4 and we'll we'll chat and we'll do things on the computers in the evening. But it's really that the approach, that feeling that you get
Of freedom.
of free. It's a feeling of freedom. And maybe
Right.
I'm still. This is still the blush. It's still brand new to me.
Yeah,
um,
actually, you're atypical. I usually don't interview people until after they've been retired at least 6 months.
mhm.
Because of the fact that when you first retire, you're running around, you're doing things. And so we're probably going to have to schedule another interview with you in about 9 months or so and see how you're doing.
Yeah, see if I'm completely a mess and unorganized.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I do have a couple of questions that I like to ask all of my retirees, and you may or may not have an answer yet. And if you don't have an answer yet, that's fine, because again, it's still new to you. But the first question is, what do you wish you would have known before you retired?
Yeah, I think that is rather interesting. Maybe not quite for me yet, because now I still haven't got I really don't feel like my head's totally in retirement yet. I think I've still got one foot in, one foot out. And I don't think there's really anything, and I've often thought that it's kind of nice to just sort of jump in on things sometimes. And I rather like that it's, for me anyway, for my personality, I like that every day is an adventure and I'm inventing it as I go along. So I don't know that I necessarily would have wanted to know anything more than, other than, making sure all the financial stuff, you got to have all that kind of stuff locked down, and, you've got to have that kind of foundational things done. But in terms of your free time and how you approach it, I rather like the fact that it's jumping without a parachute right now. And I'm going to see, well, maybe that's not the best analogy, but it's kind of nice to see where I'm going to end up.
Okay, well, we'll check back with you in a
Okay.
few months and see where you're at then. And then the second question may be the same. You may be too young of a retiree to know the answer yet. But we do have a lot of listeners who are either new retirees like yourself, or might feel stuck in their lives at the moment. And if you were sitting across a table from a new retiree, or someone who's been retired for a while but feels stuck, what's the one piece of advice that you would give them to have a successful retirement?
Well, I've got to say, listen to my podcast.
That's a perfect answer.
Stand curious. Look for some new ideas. I always find when I pick up a new hobby, whatever it is, whether it's a physical activity or whether it's, something more cerebral, there's always that excitement of first learning and first getting into it and that really is that feeling that, those are some of the best feelings that you get as you go through. Other than, you having kids and connection with your husband and your dogs and so on. But, just what you get out of what you do every day. I always need to have that excitement of learning something new, finding out something new, and giving it a try. So, yeah, listen to my podcast, get some ideas.
How can people find your podcast?
It's standcurious.com. And I've got everything there. So my contact information is there. If anybody is interested in being a guest, come on and tell me what they're up to. I'd love to talk to them. All of that information is there. So I'm on Twitter. I tend to be more of a follower than a speaker on Twitter. It's a great place to listen to other people. And no email, and there's a contact form, and a little bit more information about myself is there. So standcurious.com.
And if they want to listen to you on their phones, then the information on how to do that is on your website as well?
Yes. It's the single place for everything. So,
which is more than what I can say for mine right now. So maybe you'll have to show me how to do that.
with pleasure.
Mine is rockyourretirement.com. But I'm also on Stitcher and iTunes and all of that. But I don't have the little buttons on my website that say click here to add to. I don't know how to do that yet. So that's the next thing that Dave Jackson at School of Podcasting is going to teach me by me watching his videos.
Yes, he is a very good teacher.
Very good.
And I appreciate his sense of humor is fabulous too. He just
absolutely. So if anybody on the show is interested in starting a podcast the way that Francis and I have done, then you can go to the schoolofpodcasting.com as well and learn how to do what we're doing. Francis, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. I know that you're usually the person doing the interviewing, so thanks for taking a little break and telling us about what you are doing.
My pleasure.
And for my listeners, please go to either iTunes or Stitcher or Podcast Addict and subscribe to the show. And that way you'll get a notification every time a new episode is uploaded. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Rock Your Retirement.
Thanks for listening to the Rock Your Retirement Show. If you are rocking your retirement or know someone who would make a great guest on our show, please send us an email at podcast@rockyourretirement.com.
Has your doctor told you to exercise more, but then you wondered how much more and which exercises would be best to get the results you want? I'm fitness trainer Christine Burke. I'd like to help answer your questions so you can start exercising and get some great results sooner. Right now, Rock Your Retirement podcast listeners can get free tips and a special offer by going to my website at lightheartedfitness.com/ROCK. That's lightheartedfitness.com/rock for the Rock Your Retirement special offer.